Hi everyone, welcome back to Success in 12. My name is Robert Andrews and thank you for joining me for another episode. So today I'm doing a review of day 272 of 366. I'm currently doing this review on day 279. So how I look on an emotional level, emotional level of strength and happiness and a level of confidence is actually a representation of obviously day 279 and not of day 272. And the whole point of Success in 12 is about sharing my journey so that you can get something out of it as well. And so what I've done here is I've written my timeline so you can keep track of it as well as myself, so I can review it and be able to scrutinize if anything needs to change. Like if I'm being ineffective in any areas, I can pick it out and I can assess it and make changes for what I'm going to apply for the next day. And so from what I can see here, just explaining briefly that, anything like strategies, ideas, motivation, or any sort of drive that I can give you, inspiration, anything at all, or a different perspective, hopefully what it does is it helps you be able to make that shift from wherever you are to wherever it is that you want to be. And regardless of whether you're, that stage of depression or you're at a great place in life and you have an amazing job, but you're just looking for another level. Maybe it's a different level of emotion. Maybe it's another level of relationship. You want to take that to the next level. So whatever it is, I believe that I have something in my journey that will be able to help you with that. And so what I'm doing is I'm keeping track of all the different situations that are occurring during the day, and just keeping record of that so that I can assess it like effectively. And I've actually taken that to the next level, as you'll see in day 277 and day 278. I've started to change how I actually record my day-to-day actions, and what you'll see is I'll be noting like what emotional level I'm at. So just give you an idea of the emotional levels that I'm feeling, and so that I can sort of assess, well, is that really an emotional level that's helping me be more effective? And in some cases, like, being at a emotional level of 6, for example, 0 being like severely depressed and 10 being amazingly joyful and like, having, this euphoric feeling. So usually operating from an emotional level of 6 is usually the best way. So it's more of an emotional level of being content. And I find that's usually the most effective level to be at whenever you're trying to get work done. And then I just spike it up to whatever higher levels, like around about 8s and 7s or 9s, to sort of like give my mind that reward, let myself sort of feel that reward that, hey, I've done something right. So I raise my emotions just to create that difference. And so it's important to do that because you want to create your positive emotional associations to a certain behavior until it becomes automatic, until it becomes unconscious. And so the reward system is basically so that I then create an unconscious behavior, and then after that's unconscious, I don't need any sort of emotional reinforcement after that, and that just becomes fully automatic. But then again, the reward system will be automatically will be something that's unconscious as well, because it will be a behavior that I'll have to repeat over and over again. So I'm going to make sure that all those parts are just fully automatic, and maybe you can apply something like that for yourself. As you can see, at 5:30 I'm waking up and I've only had about 5 hours sleep, and the reason for this is because I was attending I was a part of a meetup group, and it's Stockholm entrepreneurs. And the organizer basically invited me to help out and also help me get exposure as well. So I signed everyone in, and I recorded some of the speeches that occurred that night, and got to talk with some of the CEOs and lots of other contacts that were there. And basically what the meetup was about was helping businesses be able to get themselves going without having to look for funding from, say, a VC or angel investor. Trying to think of the different the different investors that you might turn to, or even just a government agency to sort of help you with that funding. And you really can, and they gave lots of different examples of how to get going. and it was very informative. I think a lot of people got a lot out of being there at that seminar and listening to all the different CEOs talk about their experiences and how they became, how they got their businesses to become successful, with very little financing. And moving right along, then you see that, because I've got all this extra energy, I'm actually trying to start up my own meetup group, and I signed it up, and I do that at 6:40 in the morning, and also write up my description for the group, as well as I start writing about my journey in the description. But then I realize I can set that aside for my website, and I can leave that for when I'm actually doing a conference or something like that, rather than repeat myself. So I figured that was probably the best way to do that. Rather than just spill everything in my description, I'll gradually reveal that during some of my seminars, like who I am and where I'm coming from, and what my experiences are and how I'm able to help. Well, some of that actually is in a general description, in so that people can see that when they look at the group, but obviously not in so much detail. Now, other than that, then moving on to later parts of the day, at 4:10, sorry, I would go back to sleep at 11:30 after all that work, and then I wake up at about 3:25, and so this is a terrible waste of my day. But the thing is, I had some inspiration and I had extra energy, and I didn't know what to do with it. Oh, sorry, I did know what to do with it, and so I just used my energy and directed it where it needed to go. But I'm still wondering whether that was right to do. Maybe I should have just taken that inspiration last night, started the ball rolling, but then went to bed and then picked up where I left off, in the morning, and that way, I could have gotten to sleep. I would have had a properly functioning day, and I probably would have been a lot more effective in using all my time, as we're having this a little bit of sleep here, a little bit of sleep there, which just doesn't help at all, and is unhealthy for me anyway. Well, having all this broken sleep, it's not good for anyone. And yeah, so then I wake up, and then I'm eating lunch, and also I'm looking at different opportunities to be able to expand on YouTube. And I'm looking at a program called TubeBuddy, which is an extension that you can add to YouTube, and which I read about somewhere, and I figured, well, I'd investigate this and see what it had to offer. But it was actually a program that does cost a little bit of money. The free version, I heard, isn't that good. I'll be assessing that anyway. I think I need to relook at that option and really assess what it has to offer, and see if I can actually do all those things automatically myself, compare, how much does it cost me in time to actually do what this program does, or in an automated sense, and see am I really saving myself time, or is it going to be a big hassle further down the road. And I'm kind of stuck with that decision with TubeBuddy, but I'll have a look at that a little bit more later on. And so me and my girlfriend ended up going to see some friends, and we're having dinner over their place, and we have great conversation, great meal. It was really nice to be with them, and and to spend time with them and their son. Great time, and I really love connecting with kids. Kids are great, and like I said in previous vlogs, I said that it's always amazing to be able to empathize with children, because they come from this place of such innocence, and so it's always refreshing to be around kids. I love being around kids, and I have so many nieces and nephews, and I wish I had more time with them, and I imagine they know that, and it's great being around them, and it's quite painful actually being away from family that are all the way back in Australia, and I wish I had to use that time more effectively and being around them a little bit more. Obviously time and distance makes the heart grow fonder, and yeah, I just really wish I had have spent more time connecting and creating that stronger relationships But I guess, like, you know, I was really busy as well. But the thing is, you know, with me not having a job over here, I guess I have a little bit more time to be able to think about those sort of things, as where before I was working all the time. And so my mind was usually just focused on work and making the money that I needed to be able to travel to places and be able to travel and visit my girlfriend as well, because we're not living in the same country, but we are now. So that was a continual heavy expense that I was always trying to finance all the time. And so I did spend a lot of time working, trying to finance that. And okay, so we leave at 8:32. We leave our friend's place, and I go off to go play basketball, but I realize I haven't packed my shorts for basketball after I get all the way to this area where, this over near the basketball courts. I'm almost there. I think I'm about like 300 meters away from there, and I realized I hadn't packed my shorts, and I was like, okay, have to go back home, and we can forget about basketball for today. Anyway, I go back home, and actually, while I'm traveling on the train to basketball, I start reassessing a subject that we were talking about during the dinner, and it was the subject came about because we were talking about the sun and how he can apparently understand everything that we were saying. And I said that, you know, language is something that we hear like when we're in the womb, and also it's instinctual as well, that we can create language by instinct. And the thing is like, well, I came across as if it was like it was verbal language. I started going into things like, you know, pidgin languages and stuff like that, and I was really off track. And what I should have done is, like, you know, thought about it a little bit more, because I started to realize that, you know, pidgin language actually doesn't explain the topic that I was trying to use that story to explain. And I was like, oh, hang on, okay, no, it's a pidgin language is a language that's created between two or more different languages, so that, like, you know, these groups of people can communicate. And that was actually during the article I'd read about that was actually based on slavery. And what I realized is I needed to do more research on the subject, and I had previously done a lot of research on the subject, but I had to get re-familiar with it. And so I started researching language development, and it turned out to be a real fascinating read. And you know, reading topics about language deprivation experiments and the evolution of language, and an article on neuro and anthropology, life without language. And that particular article was very interesting because it talked about a man who couldn't sign language. He couldn't sign because he was deaf, and he hadn't really had the need to communicate with people. He just copied everything people had done, and so he never really realized that people were talking, and that, you know, people's mouths were moving, and these hand gestures were, you know, people communicating between each other. And so he never ever learned how to sign up until he was 27 years old, and he was in this class with this teacher who eventually broke through with him and actually taught him how to sign. And he goes on to saying that, the interview talks about how the teacher is trying to continually get information about what life was like before he could actually sign language and actually know that he could communicate between others with signing and talking. And he talks about how, he keeps throwing off the subject about how he doesn't understand why people want to know this, because it's a horrible time in his life, and that's when he was stupid, and like it's something that shouldn't be that interesting, and he just doesn't comprehend it. But he goes on to telling her at some stage that he comes across people before he had met her, this teacher that taught him how to speak with sign language, that he was able to communicate with others without talking, without signing, and they could just understand each other. And that spiked my curiosity. It's like, okay, wow, like, you know, he was talking about other people who didn't have language, but they were still communicating. And I'm like thinking, well, it brought me back to the subject of, like, you know, body language, how that makes up so much of how we communicate. And I think it's like 70%. So, you know, perhaps him and these other languageless people, in the sense that they don't have sign language or spoken language, were communicating through body language, perhaps, or like facial expressions, or, you know, eye movements. Who knows? And I really hope they find out, like, you know, how someone who doesn't have spoken or sign language communicate. And I imagine it does have maybe something to do with body language and facial expressions and eye movements. And I can't think of any other way, unless, like, we're talking about telepathy, but then that's never been proven. So yeah, just very, very interesting. And moving right along, I mean, I spend a lot of that time traveling to the basketball courts and then back home. And then actually, once I get home, I start even researching topics like about Piaget's program, and about Jean Piaget, and cognitive approach, as well as yeah, so I start researching those particular subjects. And that was really interesting, you know, being able to understand these different theories again, being able to read them again and pull them apart and see how I can actually use them in the sense of coaching, because obviously they have relative components to other parts of psychology. And so I was looking at the little segments of information that Piaget described, and how they would be altered, or they could be completely changed. And I think the terms were assimilation. This is just by my memory. I think it's assimilation and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was definitely interesting. I need to go look at it again, really, to master it, because otherwise then I can't. Oh, actually, it's not the fact that I can't use it. I understand how it applies to coaching, because that's all I think about. And it's like, whenever I'm looking at these sort of subjects, the problem is like, the reason why I'm not that great at communicating the details about these different theories and ideas is because I don't really care about the labels. I'm more worried about, like, how can I use whatever theory there is and then apply it to be able to help someone. And I don't really look to try to explain the theory. It's more like I put 110% of my concentration on, okay, that's interesting, how do I use that in coaching? That's 100% of my focus, is just how do I use that. I don't focus on trying to make myself, like, you know, feel more intelligent or stand above someone else with my ego and go, well, I know this, and because of this, I might actually have an emotional problem or association with, you know, people who can quote things like precisely. And so I think maybe when I was a kid, like when I was a grade A student, I did get picked on a lot because I was able to recall subjects quite precisely, and you know, a lot of kids would hate me for that. And so I think partially I have a negative association to that, and I think I deviated as I got older, more or less focusing not on being able to quote things precisely, but more so, you know, just applying whatever it is that I know, rather than trying to use it as a way of, like, you know, propping myself up above others. And I mean, being able to quote something precisely is not that, and that's just a irrational label, and that's something I shouldn't need to have anymore. You know, I should be able to, like, read things like this and actually be able to quote them precisely, because that'll help me in exactly what I'm trying to do, coach people to get from wherever they are to wherever it is they want to be. So I'm well aware of my own personal issues and how they're setting me back, but you know what, for all the people that I've ever coached, or at least I think most of them actually, it's never been a problem. As long as I know how to apply whatever it is that I've learned from all these different theories, it's never been a problem. It's just, I just apply the theories and that's it. But the thing is occasionally there's some people who just want to know exactly, well, what are you using and how are you using that? And where does it come from? What's the basis of this? And usually I have very simple terms and ways of explaining what I'm trying to do, but I can't quote like, you know, it's not that I can't, but I don't necessarily always quote exactly how it is in psychology and how it's used. And, you know, I don't exactly explain, you know, the different components that don't really apply to what it is I'm trying to do, which is coaching. And, you know, to me, that's just excess information that I didn't really need. And it's like everything that I read is like, I'm continually trying to ask that question. How do I apply this to what I want to be able to do? And, you know, I think I'm going to have to re-look at that. Obviously, adjust how I see being able to quote things precisely, because, you know, there will be people that I will be coaching in the future that will need to understand exactly, you know, quote for quote, where are you getting this from? You know, is this like a Freudian theory? Is this, you know, a Piaget theory? Is this like is this some sort of like application from non-directive therapy? Is this like yeah, whatever therapy that I'm trying to use? And people really want to know that. So I need to get clear on being able to understand that and change those emotional associations. I think hopefully I've given you something from everything that I've just said, you know, for day 272. I've actually divulged quite a lot about myself. Like, you know, I've exposed my most vulnerable parts by talking about this, because this part about not being able to quote things precisely is actually something that's quite sensitive to me. I remember, you know, being a grade A student and being exceptionally good at being able to, you know, read something and then just quote it precisely, and then kids teasing me about it. And I was a grade A student for a very long time, but then I became popular, and then, you know, being able to quote things precisely was just kind of like the wrong thing to do. So, you know, behavior patterns, my associations to being able to do that kind of just went out the window. That skill just kind of, it's probably still in my brain. The network for doing that is probably wired somewhere, and, you know, perhaps I can just, like, you know, reconnect those neurons and just have that going again. Maybe not, maybe, but I don't know unless I try. And I think if I apply myself, I can have that back. I don't see why not. And I believe anyone can be able to, you know, learn something and be able to quote things precisely. It's not something that I don't think is in the range, is not within the realm of anyone's capability. As long as, you know, everything's functioning right, you know, you should be able to do these sort of things. And I really want to be able to get to the stage where I am the best at what I do. I want to be the best coach out there. And I don't want to be second. I don't want to be third. I want to be the best. And that's the way I've always been. Anything that I do, I'm always the best at it. And yeah, that's a different thing. If it ever came to work and being the best at work, I could quote things precisely. So it's interesting how that has a different set of rules as opposed to, you know, learning something through a textbook or any sort of manual, as opposed to a work manual, you know, quoting something precisely and saying, well, you know, this section blah 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 says this, but, you know, when it comes to psychology or, like, you know, any other any subject where it's not work related, then, you know, for some reason I just can't quote it. That's ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense. And all that does, so that you understand this, it's because of the sets of rules that you have in your mind, and they might not be conscious, they might be unconscious. And I know I've kind of started rambling on, but I mean, I'm just discovering something that well, actually, it's not that I'm just discovering. I've been well aware of this for a while, but it's just that, you know, perhaps I haven't spent so much time confronting it since I've been going through Success in 12. And it's a good eye-opener. So thank you very much for joining me for day 272. Just witnessed me realizing something that might be out there completely shift the rest of this journey. And as well as that, this morning for day 279, I spent a lot of time in bed just thinking before I got up. I think for about an hour just thinking to myself, you know what, I think everything's got to change. I can't get away with being who I am right now and achieving all these things that I'm saying I'm going to be able to achieve. Everything has to change. My mind has, well, not everything has to change, but I really need to go through a massive change to be able to really pull this off. Otherwise, I'm just, you know, I'm just blowing hot air, and you're going to be disappointed. And anyone who's been following my journey, I mean, Success in 12 is still a success because I've come out of depression. I mean, that in itself is something I can still market, and that's something I can still help other people with. But the thing is I also said that I was going to achieve all these 9 goals, and you know, I don't want to half do a job. I want to be able to do it to such a level that, you know, I really come through and I really follow through on the things that I say. And so everything has to change, or not everything, sorry. You know, a lot of things have to change. My mindset needs to change. And another realization that came up today while doing these recordings, because I spent about 4 hours, actually probably 5 hours now, doing these recordings, and this is probably the longest recording out of all of them. And what I found is I realized that there's a state of confidence that I can just go into, which I'm just falling into right now because I'm thinking of it. And ever since I've been here in Sweden, I felt that it's inappropriate for me to be this confident. People have treated me badly for being confident, and I don't understand it. And actually, while reviewing what I know about Sweden, okay, no, it's not that I don't understand it, it's more the fact that I don't understand why people can't see things beyond their own culture. It's, you know, people should be able to be confident and sure of themselves, and you know, not everyone who's confident and sure of themselves is going to abuse that strength and confidence. I don't get why people are so negative about it, and I've been attacked on it, you know, on numerous occasions, and I don't even think it's the attacking. It's more the fact that in Australia, I can argue the point that it's okay to be confident. You know, people get it. People go, well, I'd love to be able to be confident. Please teach me how to be confident. Here, if I express a strong level of confidence, people don't want that. And so I can't argue my point as to why what I'm doing is okay, which is just bizarre to me. It's like, why aren't I allowed to be confident? Why do you have such a problem with it? And I think I was just so taken back by the fact that, you know, people aren't willing to take that on board, that, you know, they can be confident, and then they're not interested in wanting to be confident to that level. They see it as a level of arrogance. I don't know. Maybe I need to reassess that. Maybe I need to look at that a little bit more. And perhaps the reason why I have that particular association is because I was looking at it from a distorted filter. So when I was going through some trauma, maybe I got all those beliefs and ideas and those perceptions because I was looking at everything through that negative filter through that trauma that I experienced. So that's something I need to assess. I have to relook at that and maybe just keep being that old confident person that I used to be. Go back to doing that. And maybe there's a way, maybe I was doing it in a way which was inappropriate and I didn't realize was inappropriate. And it might just be a tiny detail and I'm not aware of it. And once I find out what it is, I can make that adjustment. And so my purpose is not to offend people or hurt people. It's actually to help people. And I guess maybe in giving advice and talking about it confidently in the way that I was, maybe came across in a way which was inappropriate. So many different ways to look at it, but the thing is like I didn't have any problems in regards to, you know, having people understand me in Australia or any other country for that matter, except for when I've come here. And there are people who have come from other countries that do kind of understand what it is that I'm talking about, which is, yeah, it's just a bit bizarre. I find I'm still trying to work out how to make things work here. And it's not that I have a problem with Sweden, it's just that I have a problem with how can I be me and live in this culture? How do I get Swedes to, you know, accept me as me? Because I don't feel like I'm a bad person. It's just that maybe what I'm doing is regarded as something that's negative in the culture, and I need to work out a way of like still being me and living in this culture if I'm going to stay here. It's pretty tough making that adjustment. It's been really tough, and I think that's what additionally shook me, inclusive of the trauma that I went through, was the fact that I felt like I couldn't find people that I could relate to up until I found the business networks, and then by then it was too late. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me and for listening in on, you know, where I'm currently at with Success in 12, and I hope you join me for day 273. Thank you very much. Bye.